Okay, everyone, I'm going to try something different for the photosynthesis information and how I present that to you. And I want to do that with a PowerPoint like I normally would in a face-to-face class. So first I want to show you the overall equation for photosynthesis. And I want to make it clear that this is the overall equation for photosynthesis. One of the problems that occurred on the last quiz was that and this was on the take-home part, when I asked you for the equations for the different stages of cellular or aerobic respiration, you only gave me the overall equation, and that's why some of you only got 2 points for that particular answer. But anyway, so now you know, plus I added back 7 points, which is a lot. So what we have here is photosynthesis. Now, you might wonder why the book starts with photosynthesis and other lecturers start with photosynthesis, and I started with cellular respiration and fermentation. And I do that because basically, to me, it's easier to explain cellular respiration than it is to explain photosynthesis. But the issue with that is photosynthesis comes first. We are looking at one of those overall outcomes of the course where we're looking at energy transfer. Remember, the first law of thermodynamics tells us that energy is not created or destroyed, only converted from one form to another. And the second law tells us that during those energy transfers, some or all even of that energy is converted from a more ordered form to a less ordered form. And again, heat is going to be the manifestation of the second law of thermodynamics. Oops, okay. So this is a transfer of energy, sunlight energy into chemical potential energy in glucose. So we have the sun, that is the ultimate source of our biological energy. And basically the sun has these photons and there's energy involved, or the sunlight does. It's energy basically. And that there's this really amazing electromagnetic spectrum that is from the sun. But notice that only this small amount is visible light. And that's what we're looking at for photosynthesis, is this small amount of visible light. Not these wavelengths, not these wavelengths, but this small amount here of the emissions from the sun. Some of you ask about the primary producers, or the photosynthetic autotrophs. So plants, almost every plant is a photosynthetic autotroph. There are a couple of truly parasitic plants that are not photosynthetic. Like one is called dodder, if you wanted to look that up. It's kind of interesting. Then there are some protists. Someone asked about the percentage of the protists that are photosynthetic, and I just don't have that answer. I did a quick Google search last night and couldn't find anything. And then some prokaryotes. Most of the prokaryotes are not photosynthetic autotrophs. So basically, this is a prokaryote that it's Anabaena that is photosynthetic. This is a mat of algae on a pond, so that would represent our protist. And I have an aquatic plant here that we sometimes use, in fact, for labs, which is called Elodia. So in The eukaryotic primary producers, the chloroplast, are the sites of photosynthesis. Now, of course, prokaryotes do not have, prokaryotes, I don't think that shows up that well. Prokaryotes do not have the chloroplast, but they do have some enfoldings of their cell membranes that set up a place for the membrane gradient that to be achieved, that is part of the light independent reactions, or light dependent reactions. All right, we're still in a little bit of background here, and there are quite a few different plant pigments. Anything that gives color to a plant is one of its pigments. But chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B are the most common of the photosynthetic pigments. Prokaryotes and protists might have something different than the sorry, I was distracted by the light on the camera. Okay, so let me start over. Prokaryotes may have something different, or they do have something different than chlorophyll. Most of the photosynthetic pigment protists do as well. When I talk about chlorophyll, I'm talking specifically about plants and one group of green algae, which would be the closest relative to the plants within the protist. You don't have to know all that. What you need to know is we have chlorophyll A and B. Notice there are two peaks. There's one over here in the violet and blue, and a peak over here. Well, each of them has a peak. So chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, and then chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B over here in the reds. So these are absorption spectra. So this is the ability of the chlorophyll to absorb the plant pigments, the sun's rays, not the plant pigments. It's the ability of the chlorophyll or other pigments, as you can see here, there are a couple of others that are listed, to absorb sunlight energy. And chlorophyll A and B do not absorb light in the green visible part, or the green part of the visible spectrum. And that is because it reflects green. And that's why we see green when we look at a plant leaf. The chlorophyll does not absorb light in the green part of the spectrum. Instead, it reflects it. That's an important thing to remember. Okay, so if we look at this leaf here, it's a cut section of a leaf, and there's an upper epidermis and a lower epidermis, and the cells are even arranged differently. Look how closely packed the cells are in the closer to the upper epidermis, while those that are close to the lower epidermis are more randomly placed and there's more space. That's intentional, or that's an adaptation, not intentional. It's an adaptation that allows for, in these spaces, for gases to be, for example, for the oxygen that is being produced to move out of the leaf through what we call stomata, and the CO2 that's needed for photosynthesis to move into the leaves so that photosynthesis can occur. Specifically then in the plants, and this is where we're going to focus, photosynthesis occurs within the chloroplast. I've asked you to be able to draw and label a chloroplast, and what we have here is an outer membrane and an inner membrane. Okay, so the outer one's here, the inner one's here. This one's labeled fairly well. I like this. So it's a double membrane bound organelle. Then we have these stacks of what look like green coins. And each of the quote-unquote coins would be considered a thylakoid. And this is actually where photosynthesis takes place, in the thylakoid. So each of these little coin-looking structures. And it's across that membrane that we have not one, but two electron transport systems or chains. Then there's the liquid matrix that's called the stroma. And that is where we find the Calvin cycle, the light independent part of photosynthesis. Now there is one more thing. A stack of thylakoids is called a granum. Plural, that would be grana. So there were 5 parts: outer membrane, inner membrane, thylakoid, granum, and stroma that I wanted you to be able to draw and label. This summarizes photosynthesis again. So we have an input of light, water, and carbon dioxide. From that, we get oxygen and a sugar and a sugar. So that's what we get. Now, notice that we have the light reactions and the Calvin cycle. And this is tying these two together. The light reactions, that's where the sunlight is necessary. And what happens is water is split in the light reactions, releasing oxygen and providing the electrons and the hydrogen ions for the electron transport systems that allow for, and I don't know if you can see this very well, the production of ATP and NADPH that go to the Calvin cycle, and this is where the CO2 is also a substrate, and then we have our sugar production. Notice that NAD pluses and ADP plus P then recycle into the light dependent reactions. I'm going to talk more about that so it'll make more sense. So the light dependent reactions, it's basically about light absorption, electron excitement, electron transfer, and then ATP production and NAD reduction to NADPH. So this looks scary, and I'm not asking you to draw this or memorize all this. What I want you to see is that there are 2 photosystems, photosystem 2, photosystem 1. So this is actually the photosystem, and this is the electron transport system that's associated with photosystem 2. Did I call it photosystem 1? It's photosystem 2. Photosystem 1 is here. Notice with each of these we have the light absorption in the form of the photons of light, and then the electron transport chains or systems. And then, ATP synthase, our old friend ATP synthase from cellular respiration. So notice that photosystem 2 comes first. You might wonder why, if this is going this way, this direction. Well, I have an answer. It's because photosystem 1 was discovered first. There you go. Now, what is going to happen is light is going to be absorbed by photosystem 2, excite electrons. Eventually, a couple of special electrons are going to be removed. They're going to be so excited, they're going to jump off and into the electron transport chain. What that will do then, as the electrons move through, is provide the energy to pump the hydrogen ions into the thylakoid, inside the space of the thylakoid. Now, as the electrons move through, they lose energy. So when they get to photosystem 1, ooh, some more light, ooh, energized again, electrons getting energized, passing that energy on until two special ones hop out into the electron transport chain and move through that electron transport chain. Notice then more pumping of hydrogen ions, and then we have ATP synthase with that potential energy here due to the increased hydrogen ions inside here relative to outside. Here they come, providing the free energy that's needed to add that third phosphate group to ADP, producing ATP. Then those hydrogens and the electrons that have come through this through photosystem 1 attach or reduce NADP to NADPH. And those are our two big products, or two of our big products.